I may be wrong, but what I actually believe is we're going to create this technology that is more transformative than any technology humans have ever created. And almost no one is paying attention or talking about it. I really genuinely believe that this is going to change the world in unrecognizable ways. It's going to make what we talked about happening earlier with the iPhone look like a warm up. And we got to talk about that.
The thing that's amazing is like just how that's 6 years.
That was 6 years ago.
So much. That's not very long.
6 years ago, Sam Altman said that on camera. Nobody was watching. Today, OpenAI is reportedly worth $1 trillion, and Sam just gave one of the most honest, uncomfortable interviews I've seen from him, covering AI and your job. A solo founder who already quietly built a billion-dollar company, why he won't let his own child near his own product, and the one shift he says nobody is talking about nearly enough. I've pulled the moments that matter most for anyone building right now. Sam is going to do most of the talking, because honestly, he should. Let's go.
Yeah, it's easy to say, oh, we're going to have super AGI here, super intelligence here, but the reason I try to say things like that is, I think if you just say we're going to have AGI soon, people are like, okay, I don't really know what that means or how to think about it. If you say like the AI is going to do more of the total thinking than people are, that kind of like gets across the magnitude of what's happening in a way that, to me at least, I feel differently than just saying like AGI is coming soon.
In what sense?
I'm not like a long-term jobs doomer. I think we'll figure out new things to do. I think we always do. But in the short term, I think it may, again, we don't know, it could work in all these different ways. I think it may and likely will be quite disruptive to a lot of the current jobs if more of the intellectual horsepower in the world is GPUs. And I think like right now, we've got to start talking about the principles for how we want to design an economy that works for everybody, if that's going to happen. I believe that has happened. I promised I would not share details until he's ready to announce it, but I believe that has happened.
Can you give us any details around the details?
It is a legitimate single person $1 billion company. As far as I can tell, I mean, I have not like reviewed the financials.
I mean,
but I think it's just happened.
I think folks listening to that would think, well, this is AI can be so unapproachable, but the idea that that we are entering a world where you don't have to have a Silicon Valley contacts, you don't have to be able to be in this club to build out a company and have a valuation. And
Yeah.
I think OpenClaw is a really interesting example. For folks who don't know what OpenClaw is, it's kind of this like AI agent that just does anything, which of course had lots of safety issues, I would say. Like if you're going to give it access to everything, this is the most Silicon Valley thing. I just see everybody doing this and I'm like, what could go wrong? Like you do have to be very careful about the security of this, but the founder ended up joining the company.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if this was like an acqui-hire or whatever you want to call it, but he built this with AI agents.
Yeah.
I imagine
he was like one of the top users of Codex of all time. So he built this whole thing with Codex and was just like unbelievably productive in a way that no single person could have been.
Is he one of the early examples, you think, of someone who was able to, exit, sell, or, have a company with AI
massively
agents?
successful company with one person.
Does that surprise you at all?
No, and I think it's awesome. I mean, the individual empowerment that happens, as you were just saying, when you don't have to be part of the Silicon Valley network, you don't have to know all these people you can hire and these VCs that you can convince to give you.
I want to stop here for a second because what Sam just confirmed is something most people are still treating as hypothetical. A single person, one founder, $1 billion company, built with AI already. No VC, no team, no Silicon Valley network. Just someone who understood what the tools could do and used them harder than anyone else. If you're building anything right now, that's your benchmark. Back to Sam.
Not for a while.
Do you have an idea?
People ask me all the time, like, oh, now that you have a kid, or going to have more kids, like, do you feel more responsibility about how you don't destroy the world with AI?
Do you?
No, like my highest order bit is to not destroy the world with AI. Like it doesn't matter how good everything else is if we do that. So I knew I was going to have kids. And I knew that I thought a lot about what I would feel about the world my future kids would grow up in. And, that I used to write my kid a letter every night. The lawyers eventually convinced me to stop, but it was a nice thing to do about just because when I would like put him to bed, I would just I'd get home late, like right before his bedtime, and I'd be rocking him, and you just need something to talk to your kid about. So I would just tell him about my day and what was going on. And, I was like, obviously a 5-month-old, 4-month-old baby is not going to understand these things. So I was like, I'll write them down. I'll give them to him later, because it was sort of an interesting time. But an interesting thing about writing those letters would be like, you can't really hide anything. Like, you will be the most honest version of yourself in the decisions you're making in the thing you write to your kid. So I really loved doing it. It was like my every Sunday night ritual about like, here was the hard stuff that came this week, and here's why I decided and why. And, here's what I'm worried about. But the mindset of writing that to your kid to read in, 15 or 20 years, was very interesting. But no, on the not destroy the world with AI, always very set on that. A thing that has changed hugely is how I feel about algorithmic feeds and iPads in small children's hands and stuff like that. And when I watch kids just a little bit older than mine that you cannot take the iPad away from, watching this sort of like short, watching like whatever they're watching, that I feel very strongly about. So I don't know when I would let him talk to AI, but I'd rather be on the late end of what's reasonable there, not the early end. Of course, I think it's like great, and he'll grow up in a world where computers are smarter than him and do anything he wants. But I wanted to like play in the dirt for now.
You don't want AI to become the next social media. That
Certainly
is
not.
terrifying. But we're in a world where that could be a possibility without the correct guardrails.
Just as we learn more about the relationship people are going to have with AI, we should make it easy for them to succeed. We should make it easier for them to have the healthy relationship, and then give adults a lot of freedom. But kids, teenagers, I think they will need a lot of guardrails around AI. This is such a powerful and such a new thing. I think that points to not just the danger of a model that is too affirmative, but also how, there were these really heartbreaking messages people would send when we were stopping 4.0, which is, hey, this is the only thing in my life that has ever been a positive voice.
What do you think when you get those messages?
It's heartbreaking, obviously, and you really feel the weight of getting this right, where it's easy to say, hey, we don't want a model that's too affirmative because it can make, it can have negative mental effects on people. But then you hear somebody else say like, actually, I never had any confidence. I had parents who told me I was terrible. I, didn't have any friends in school. And because I've had this model, sure, maybe it's like a little too positive, but it's given me the confidence, and I've like gone out and got a job and found a girlfriend, and like, this has been the most important thing in my life, and I'm doing great, but don't take it away.
It's almost this fine line, because there are all of these stories, and it's like, push this far and it can help you get offline. Push this far and you begin to lose that capacity for other humans.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting moment. I think this is probably one of the most important questions that we have to ask our tech leaders as they build out the future that our children will grow up in. What have you decided not to do?
The specific thing we decided not to do is, although we think the models have extreme power to be a positive force in people's lives, we don't know how to balance a model that can be pushed too far in that direction with the concerns of, I think you said is like kind of pushing people into a psychotic episode. And so we've made a decision, which is we know we're keeping something, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have warm models. Of course we should. But there are a lot of people who would like 4.0 back. And we've decided, when looking at the full balance of upsides and risks, we can't quite offer that responsibly. There are a lot of people who would like us to have less restrictions on what our models can do from a bio perspective. Probably more people could, save their dogs' lives with custom mRNA vaccines if we made that a little easier and turned up the power on the model there. That would come with a big risk on novel pandemics that we've decided is not worth the trade-off. Now, eventually, I think these decisions will be made by society. It's like not up to the CEO of a company that makes airplanes what the safety regulations are. But for now, we kind of got to do it. We decided to just totally shut down Sora. We were thinking about other versions of keeping it. before the compute crunch came. Like we were talking about putting it into the ChatGPT app, really focusing on generation and creativity. But one thing that we had realized is that to succeed with it as the product was currently conceptualized in sort of this way, you could watch a lot of videos, that would have put a series of incentives on us and would have led to a bunch of decisions to win that we just didn't want to make. So there was some version of that, and there still is some version of letting people generate video that I think is awesome. To compete in short-term video feeds and where that's going to go in a world of AI was not something I wanted to have to go do.
What Sam is describing there, building something deliberately less addictive than it could be, is a decision that costs revenue. Most founders won't make it. But the other side of that coin is the affirmation trap, an AI that tells you what you want to hear, that validates everything, that never challenges you. It feels like a tool, but it's a liability. The question worth asking about every AI tool you use: is this making me sharper or just more comfortable? That distinction will separate the builders who thrive in this era from the ones who don't. Back to Sam.
My most exciting meeting of last week was with a physicist who's using one of our latest internal systems. He said, my mind has been completely blown. I didn't think this would ever happen. We are going to make decades worth of theoretical physics progress in the next couple of years. And, some people will say, okay, who cares? You can write a better equation. But I am a believer that scientific progress is one of the most, maybe the most important thing we can do to make the world better and better. Obviously, we can do things like develop new cures for diseases, but there's so much more. Material science, new ways to produce clean and cheap energy, abundant energy, that if we are really on the precipice of being able to use AI to dramatically accelerate science, then I think we can solve some of the biggest problems in the world. Probably automated researchers. Like, I know we're talking about some, but like if we weighted every conversation in this room relative to that we had today, relative to its importance to the future, we probably would have talked way more about automating research and way less about everything else.
You're saying one of the most important conversations we're not having is about automated research. Like what does that mean for humanity?
Like 10 years of the whole world's scientific progress in 1 year, and then 100 years of progress in 1 year, the transformation that will have to quality of life, to the economy, to new risks, like this is just, there's no analog for this. I'm excited for this.
What do you think is the single most important ethical question we need to ask ourselves when it comes to the future of like us tech and humans?
In a world where we're going to have computers that can think like humans, what is the society we want to design? This question of what do we want the role of humans to be in the world, and how do we make sure the world is good for humans in the broadest sense? I think that is the biggest ethical question of our lifetime.
Do you agree with
that? I
that?
have nothing to add or change to that.
How do you think we're doing on answering that question?
Better than much better than I feared we would be doing. Obviously not as well as I hoped.
Better than I feared, not as well as I hoped. That's the most honest summary of where we are with AI that I've heard from anyone in that room. The window to build intelligently with this technology, to understand it before it becomes obvious, is right now. If this hit differently than the usual AI content, subscribe. That's what this channel is for. And drop a comment. What's the one thing from Sam in this video that changes how you're thinking about your business? Subscribe if you are not subscribed, and see you soon.